Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight, I'm going to jump into one of my favorite topics here. But, I wanted to put a little spin on this. I've said all along when I discussed this question of what Black Brazilian women labeled as palmitashi over the years, the apparent preference of Black Brazilian men for white women, they call it palmitashi. And this accusation has been going on for a number of years. I mean, I think they just gave it a name maybe in about 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And the term just caught on online. Everybody's talking about palmitashi. Everybody's people who are said to have, hooked up with a white partner are called palmiteiros. And specifically, the term was used to define Black men who seem to, the accusation always said that, well, Black men will ficar, ficar, and when you translate it from Portuguese, ficar is supposed to mean stay, but when applied in situations of dating, ficar is like when you're just with somebody for a night, or you just have like a sexual relationship without actually naming the relationship as anything serious. So you say it's a ficar, it's a hookup maybe. So it's something that I wanted to get to the bottom of this for years. And a lot of the people who follow this YouTube page also are asking, well, what are the Black Brazilian men saying about this? We can clearly see how Black Brazilian women feel about it, but what are Black Brazilian men saying? What is the explanation for this? And, one thing I've noticed is that in general, you don't. Okay, let me talk about this from the American perspective, because in the if you could say what's called the manosphere online, Black American men speak openly about what type of women they like, what type of women they'll date, what type of women they'll marry, and what type of women they won't deal with. So when this question is brought up for Black American men, if they have certain problems with attributes associated with Black American women, they will say it openly. You can probably see thousands of videos where Black men talk about where Black American women are bossy, they're too masculine, they're too loud. What else do they say? They say that Black American women aren't feminine. They say that many have adapted the feminist ideology, and this goes on and on. So you'll get Black men who will openly say, like, well, I used to date Black women, but I can't really deal with them anymore for this reason, that reason, this reason, that reason. They don't hide behind this idea. The idea, the just denial. When this same topic comes up with Black Brazilian men, I often hear people just come up with this phrase that says amor não tem cor, which means love doesn't have color. So when Black Brazilian men address the issue, this is what they'll say. It's almost like to deflect the accusation by not addressing it at all. And, it's just like, if I happen to be with a white girl, it's because love doesn't have color. But then people will react and respond, well, why is it that it seems like when love has no color, all of these Black men are always booed up with white women? Particularly, again, the musicians, the top name soccer players, the actors. It goes on and on. It's like I said, it's almost the title of a book. Claudete Alves, who was formerly a councilwoman for the city of Sao Paulo, she actually wrote a book called Vida Regra, where she's saying it's become the rule. It's like, okay, it just seems that a lot of Black men will automatically go after white women. In some cases, you'll see where they were married, they had children with Black women over the years, and then eventually they'll divorce, he'll abandon the house. And next thing you know, he's in the street with a white woman, he's in a new house, he started a new family with a white woman. This is a story that you hear over and over. I've talked to plenty of Black women who have told me, like, yeah, this happened in my family too. All of my cousins, my uncles, my father, they all had Black women you know, years ago, but then as the years went on, they ended up divorcing or just leaving the home altogether and, starting a whole new relationship with a white woman. So, there have been a few Black men who have spoken out on this topic. There's one particularly, it's a really good article that I wanted to discuss one day. I'm not going to talk about it today, but in the future, definitely going to use that article. And not to say it speaks for all Black Brazilian men, but it does give you an idea of perhaps what the culture is in terms of how Black Brazilian men see women. Is there were periods in the United States where I specifically remember in the late 80s and early 90s and a lot of hip hop, American hip hop, you had this faction of Black rappers who were talking about, look, you need to form a family with a Black woman. You need to love, honor, respect the Black woman. This is the Black queen, right? I've never really ever seen something like that in Brazil, not on a widespread level, right? There is a growing movement now that's calling for what's called amor afrocentrado or amor preto, which mean Afrocentric love or Black love, respectively. It's just saying that, Black people need to start looking up. Black men and women need each other. We need to get together because for centuries they've been indoctrinated to say, look, you should get a white partner. You should try to whiten your bloodline, right? This is intriguing to follow. I see it being a small parcel of the population who's, considering opening themselves up specifically to date Black. I've seen women online and men who talk about, wow, I never thought about dating a Black person. If you saw the video that I did a couple of weeks ago, a woman, she went back and talked about her dating history with this one particular guy where she was dating a Black man. And he flat out told her, like, look, if I cheat, I'm going to cheat with a white woman. I have to have a white woman by my side. It's no use being with somebody Black like me. That was one of the most brutally honest comments I had ever heard, and obviously there wasn't a Black man who actually said it, but he was quoted as being said. He was quoted as having said this to the woman that he was dating at the time. There's other really good material that's out there, but it's just, you don't get this openness with Black Brazilian men talking about if they indeed have a preference, or if they claim that they have a preference for white women. Why is it that they feel this way? A friend of mine, he spoke a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago with me, and he just explained, he says, look, Mark, quite honestly, and this is a Black Brazilian man speaking about it. And he says, quite honestly, the relationships that I've had with Black Brazilian women are just disastrous because they are crazy. He says, I could never really deal with a Black woman. That's why I'm not opposed to dating Black women, but I can't date the type of women that, I've had experiences with. And he talks about, he's adamant in his belief that not only just historically how Black women are, Black Brazilian women, some of the stereotypes that are attached with it has created this type of character, this type of personality that he says every time he tried to date a Black woman, he always got that personality. And it's like, I can't deal with this. What else did he say? Yeah, he was saying, he spoke on how he saw that same type of personality among the Black women in his own family. And he says, I could never date a woman like that. It's like, these women are crazy. And then you add to that the growing popularity of feminism within, within the Black women's group. And it was pretty deep what he was talking about. He gave some really specific examples, and it's not something that I am going to just totally co-sign on it, because I am not a Brazilian. I have, I have dated Black Brazilian women myself. But this was intriguing what he said. It was almost like if this wasn't an American, you would have thought by the things that what he was saying, it sounded almost identical to what a lot of Black American men say about Black American women. Why is that? That's something I want to just dig more into. But right now, I want to talk about this article that came out. I'll have to look at the original, but it's called "Everything Wrong About the Loneliness of the Black Woman" argument. This is something in Portuguese, how they say the solidão da mulher negra. It's saying Black women activists have for years talked about how Black men have abandoned them. They'll be in relationships, quote unquote, relationships with Black men who won't say officially that, their boyfriend, girlfriend, they're in a relationship. He's not ready for a relationship. And then he'll break off whatever he has with the Black woman. And then all of a sudden he pops up in a long-term relationship with a white girl. So they've long called this the loneliness or the solitude of Black women. There's been cover stories in magazines about this. Black women activists made this a cover story. I'd say that it really started growing in discussions online back in about 2015, maybe. And, I followed this discussion. I wanted to listen to everything that was being said. And I always wanted to say, well, why is there no rebuttal by Black men? You would see it occasionally, but it was never anything where Black men were putting their perspective on this in the numbers that Black women were. And so I'm like, I want to hear an objective response from Black Brazilian men and how they feel about this accusation. Like I said, it would come out periodically, but never in the numbers that Black Brazilian women were discussing this issue of being lonely, taking longer to secure long-term relationships, taking longer to ever get to the altar to get married, being abandoned at some time in their life. So, it's a lot to unpack there. So this particular article, the original Portuguese, this is the one right here. And this article, in Portuguese is titled Tá Tudo Errado com a Solidão da Mulher Negra. And it's by a guy at medium.com who calls himself Balugum Manu Yaya Okoto, right? I noticed, a lot of Black Brazilians are adapting African oriented type names. So I don't know if this guy probably does have a Brazilian name, but he likes to use his Afrocentric name online, which is cool. It shows, the adaptation, how people are getting closer to African roots or whatever. So this is a piece that he put out just it's been almost a year as today, today is February 2nd. This 2023, this article came out February 9th of 2022, almost a year ago. So this is the piece that I'm going to be covering today too. And I wanted to hear, how he broke it down, what his thoughts were on this whole discussion. The friend of mine who I'm telling you about, he also sees this constant idea of the loneliness of Black women. He sees it as a sham. He sees it as playing the victim. He sees it as the type of Black woman that he's dealt with. He can understand why these women are single. So I want to get into this article right now. It's a pretty short read, but then I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about as I go through it. Maybe I'll interweave some of my own material with it. Maybe I'll wait to the end, but let's just get into the story. Everything wrong about the loneliness of Black women argument. Okay. Everything is wrong with the loneliness of Black women. So starting with the origin of this collective turmoil, which was the result of Claudete Alves's master thesis at PUC University in Sao Paulo, it already started well. To support this poorly done work, which, by the way, begins with the author thanking Jesus, 1,445 couples were analyzed, of which 418 were Black men with Black women, and the rest, 1,027, were Black men with white women. So I want to point out again that this piece, he's referring to Claudete Alves at the time it was a master's thesis. It eventually became a book that I mentioned previously called Vida a Regra, which means it's become the rule. She's saying, this is what you find with Black men, particularly of the middle class. Like if they move up the social ladder, they're definitely going to be married to a white woman, which is something that I have seen. It's something that I can attest to. But as he's going on, he asked a question. Did you find the error? No. Read it again. She did not analyze any couple of Black women with white men. Basic error, clumsy error. This is what is called confirmation bias, which is the tendency to remember, interpret, or search for information in a way that confirms initial beliefs or hypothesis. Okay, so, this is something that I've talked about before. How do people accept information when it goes against what they believe? Okay, so this is what this little cartoon is saying. It's a belief. So you got all these people over here showing evidence that you are wrong, right? On the other side, you have evidence that you're right. So on the other hand, okay, so what is it saying here? You got all of this evidence over here showing you that you're wrong, and you got one over here that's showing you that you're right. I mean, which one do you roll with? It's like, okay, I don't want to hear this. Okay. And this is something that I've had to confront myself with. Okay, does what I believe match up with the facts? And if not, am I open enough to change my position? Let's keep it moving. For those of you who don't understand the gravity of the situation, imagine that I create the theory that every adult takes a dump in his pants. Then I go there and I look for people who take dumps in their pants to analyze. Then my study comes to the conclusion that all adults take a dump in their pants. That's basically what she did. So this is what he's saying about Claudette Alves's report, or, master's thesis. That's why the pretty ones say that Black women don't palmita. Of course, the quote unquote researcher that you use as a basis didn't analyze the female palmiteros. Now, if you've watched enough of my videos, you know what palmiteiro means, or palmitashi and palmita. It's the term that Black Brazilian women created sometime between 2012 and 2013. Palmiteiro defines a Black man who seems to have a preference for white women for long-term relationships. They use the term palmita as a verb. So saying, Black women don't do that. They don't swirl. They don't have a preference for white men. And so what he's saying here is this book, this thesis that Claudette Alves put out, it did not consider female palmiteiras. Like, okay, why didn't you look at Black women who specifically date white men, but you chose to focus on just Black men who have serious relationships with white women, which is that's a good question. But anyway, let's continue. A recurrent theme of Black women palmiteiras, or that is Black feminists, is the argument that historically Black women have been objectified and dehumanized, that Black men have internalized the values of white society, and that for this reason they prefer white women to Black women. There are two bizarre things there that you have to really be alienated not to realize. Before I get into that, this is another thing that a lot of Black Brazilian men will point out, that they notice that a lot of Black feminists are with white men. Why is that? Let's keep it moving. Again, so he's saying two bizarre things that you really have to be alienated not to realize. The first is to disregard that Black men have also been and continue to be objectified and dehumanized. The second is to consider that only Black men have internalized the values of a racist society. Black men and women were enslaved, but the Black woman, Golden Rosemary, magically came out unscathed. Only the imbecile Black man with his dominant, incurable scumbag male gene allowed himself to be alienated. Now, just to toss in something else, I had this friend when I was living in Sao Paulo. I had this friend from Angola, and he was living in Rio, until he moved to Sao Paulo, and I was seeing him more at that time. But while he was in Rio filming his documentary, he says, Mark, you wouldn't believe going to some of the finest beaches in Brazil, and you look on the beach and you just see some of these drop dead gorgeous Black women walking around with the most basic average looking white men, many of them, European tourists or whatever. But it's like, they're just real basic white men, and you had these beautiful Black women. So it's like, who are they calling palmiteiros? The question comes down to, okay, why is it that you see all of these Black women with white men? And is the legitimate response saying that, well, Black women don't palmita because Black men pass them over, so who else can they date? That's usually the response. And, I have to look at that also. Let me keep going with this article, because some of my material is going to actually take that question into question, just to consider this response that says, well, we date white men because Black men don't want us. Is it true or untrue? Is it partially true, or is it fully true, or is that mythology just trying to cover up that Black women also have a preference for white men? It's hard to say, but let's keep it moving.